So the other day, as I'm sure you all saw, Tucker Carlson sat down for an interview with Vladimir Putin. Now, when I first heard about it, I just kept my mouth shut on it because I was curious to see how it would unfold. I had my suspicions. My suspicion was it was going to be a hot stone massage, that it was going to be as softball-y as a softball interview can go. That was my suspicion. So it came out. I watched it. And it was a bit of a mixed bag. So Putin was smacking him around a little bit and toying with him and making a fool out of him. There were a number of like sly little jabs he took, like about how Tucker tried to join the CIA and got rejected. And he was like, well, it's a good thing you didn't join. It's a bad organization. So there was that. And it wasn't like a harsh interview. In fact, Putin came out and said, I was expecting way more piercing questions. I was expecting it to be like way more aggressive and antagonistic. And it wasn't that, right? But I would also argue it wasn't as much of a hot stone massage as I thought it would be. There were a couple times where he sort of prodded him about whether or not he's even open to wanting a peace agreement, you know, getting involved in a negotiation and using diplomacy and coming to some sort of an agreement with Ukraine and the West. And Putin was very evasive on that question. Of course, the funniest part of the whole interview was the beginning, where Tucker asks like a very simple question and Putin goes on to give like the world's longest and most boring history lesson. So honestly, I think Putin sort of whiffed colossally. There were a few times where Tucker tried to set him up for the classic, you know, go-to line that he could use, which is, hey, everything that I'm doing is solely for defensive purposes, and it's NATO's aggression that has brought me to this place, and I'm just defending my homeland. Tucker tried to pitch him that softball down the center of the plate a number of times, and every single time, Vladimir Putin would whiff it. Every single time, it would be this convoluted, long-winded answer about in 1285, King Dicky Balls did this. And it's like, he's trying to help you out in some ways, and you're failing at it, right? So it was an interesting interview. I'd say go watch the whole thing. It's worth listening to the whole thing. Do it on double speed, though, because it's boring as hell if it's any slower than double speed. Or or like 1.5 times. Either one. You guys know the deal. But the timing for Tucker could not have been worse, because he comes out after doing the interview, and he does a bunch of other interviews about the interview, right? And we're going to get to one of the things he said here in a second. But after releasing the interview, he does this, oh my God, this pathetic, embarrassing puff piece on Russia, where he like goes to a Russian grocery store and he's like, would you look at this? It is very high tech. And the prices here sure are reasonable. And the subway is so clean. Look at this. He does this whole like puff piece. And then, of course, Community Notes has a field day with him on Twitter because, okay, the prices are lower in the grocery store, but the percentage of your income that the average Russian is spending to buy those groceries is actually way higher than what it is in the U.S. So, like, it was just a very biased, misleading, you know, smooth hand job to Russia. And so everybody was like sort of making fun of that. And Tucker goes and gives an interview, and this is one of the things he said. He's asked like, hey, why didn't you ask about like Putin's political prisoners who have stood up to him, right? And who've exposed him and his corruption. Why didn't you ask about those people? To be fair, he did ask about an American that's being held in Russia, but he didn't ask about Navalny or anybody else. And there's, of course, a laundry list of people who, let's say, were top opponents of Putin, and then they mysteriously wound up dead. He didn't ask about any of them, right? So here's the question, and here's Tucker's answer.
You should challenge in the rules of an interview, and you're a master in your business. It's not for me to give you a lecture about that, but you should challenge some ideas. For instance, you didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming elections.
I didn't talk about the things that every other American media outlet talks about
Why?
exclusively.
Yes, this
because
is my
those
question.
are covered, and because I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following. that every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people, sorry. That's why I wouldn't want to be a leader. That press restriction is universal in the United States. I know because I've lived it. Ask my former, I've had a lot of jobs. And I've done this for 34 years, and I know how it works. And there's more censorship in Russia than there is in the United States, but there's a great deal in the United States. And so, at a certain point, it's like people can decide whether they think, what countries they think are better, what systems they think are better. I just want to know what he thinks. That was the whole point.
So that line really came back to haunt him, because he said, leadership requires killing people. Well, guess what? Like a day after Tucker did that goofy, look at this amazing grocery store. Look at this amazing Subway. Like a day after, Navalny dies in prison. Oh, the timing couldn't have been worse for you, Tucker. Oh, my God. Oh, boy. Tucker Carlson tries to walk back defense of Putin's killing after Navalny death. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson paused his charm offensive on Vladimir Putin's behalf to express outrage over the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny on Friday. By the way, let me just pause to point this out real quick. To say, hey, this political prisoner shouldn't get murked should be the most obvious thing in the world, right? It's not a defense of the fact that this guy is viewed as a Western puppet. It's not a defense of the fact that he said horribly atrocious things about Chechens and Muslims. None of that should factor into the most basic thing in the world, which is, hey, political opponents should not get murked on the basis of the fact that they're just political opponents. And that's what happened here. That's what happened. And if you think that's not what happened, I have a bridge to sell you. And you have the brain of a toddler. Okay? So anyway, back to it. Navalny was poisoned by Putin after years of activism against his authoritarian regime back in 2020. Nevertheless, Putin returned to Russia the following year, where he was promptly thrown in prison. The Russian prison service reported that the 47-year-old Navalny collapsed and expired after a walk on Friday. But its word is to be doubted since it's under the control of Putin. Carlson interviewed Putin last week and has also released a series of videos from his time in Moscow in which he marvels over everything in sight, from subway stations to grocery carts. Additionally, at an event in Dubai on Monday, Carlson defended Putin's penchant for ending lives he deems a threat, or even just inconvenient to him, after it was pointed out that Carlson didn't challenge Putin on his human rights record and body countering his interview with him. Carlson explained that he, quote, didn't talk about the things every other American media outlet talks about, because those are covered. Yeah, we already went through that. But Carlson struck a different tune after he was contacted by the Daily Mail about Navalny on Friday, saying, quote, it's horrifying what happened to Navalny. The whole thing is barbaric and awful. No decent person would defend it. So before it happens, it's, hey man, leadership requires killing people. Leaders kill people. It's a boring question. Everybody in the media would ask it anyway. Now it's horrifying what happened to Navalny. The whole thing is barbaric and awful. No decent person would defend it. Didn't you just say that being a leader requires killing people? Didn't you just say that? Then you kill somebody. It's bad timing. It's right in the middle of your fluff job. Man, that backfired. That backfired. Now, by the way, I have to ask the question, right? Was the timing was this timing literally like Putin being like, watch me fuck this motherfucker up right now. Like, watch me blow up his whole shit. Because you guys saw for those of you who did see the interview, Putin was toying with Tucker's ass a lot. He was slapping him around, little sly, snide comments. Apparently, he made him wait a really long time before he came in to do the interview. They said a certain time. He came in way late. It's, an expression of, domination. So, he may have literally lined up the timing to make him look like a joke. Putin may have tried to make Tucker look like a joke with the timing. I don't know. I'll ask you guys. Is that reading too much into it? Is that connecting too many dots that shouldn't be connected? You guys tell me what you think. But either way, whether it was on purpose or not, God, the timing could not have been worse. Oh, by the way, go watch the Tucker videos where he's marveling over the grocery carts in Russia. What did you expect to happen? What did you expect? What did you expect to see there? Did you expect every grocery store to be cockroach infested with stains on the walls or something? What are we doing here? What are you talking about? Marveling over the prices? The prices in Mississippi are also lower than the prices in some big American city with millions of people. What do you take away from that? It's he's only giving half the equation. Look at the low prices. Okay, but what about the colossally low wages, way lower than what we have here in the United States? It was all so biased and misleading and, didn't work out too well for old Tuck now, did it? Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.